Hello again and welcome back to my senior project. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Riley Golke Sharmer and I'm a senior at SUNY Oneonta. This is the second video in a series about my senior project in which I worked with the Girl Scout troop and made some lesson plans and teaching them about the Albany Pine Bush and the endangered species that live there. The second video is going to be giving you guys some background information about the Albany Pine Bush and the Carnable Butterfly. I hope you find it informative and helpful.
A lot of the vegetation and plants that you see around the Albany Pine Bush are going to be very reminiscent to Cape Cod if you've ever been. And that's going to be because, similar to Cape Cod, this is a pine barren ecosystem that is inland, which is what makes it so unique. There are only about 20 of these pine barren ecosystems in the world, and the Albany Pine Bush historically was one of the bigger ones. Due to a lot of the habitat destruction, of course, that has been dwindled down to only about 3,300 acres. But it is still incredibly biodiverse with over 1,500 different species and home to that endangered species, the Carnable butterfly that we've been talking about. While most people refer to the Albany Pine Bush as a pine barren ecosystem, its actual classification is a pitch pine scrub oak barrens ecosystem. Now, those scrub oaks are another type of plant. They're similar to a shrub that you're going to be seeing all over the ground in the Albany Pine Bush. Of course, it's in the same family as the oak tree, and so you'll still see those wonderful little acorns on the ground, and you'll see the oak trees just around the Albany Pine Bush as well. So another type of plant species that we see at the Albany Pine Bush is the trees that we see all around us, which is the pitch pine tree. The pitch pine tree have evolved to live in this sandy soil with very little nutrients and very little moisture. They have grown into these, they're not very big, they're smaller trees, but they are incredibly durable. They have really great thick trunks that can survive wildfires, and they have these very strong protective seed coat on there that protects their seeds that actually kind of need a disturbance to be released. So these trees are perfect for the type of environment that is home to wildfires, which is the Albany Pine Bush. Historically, the Albany Pine Bush was known to have wildfires. That was part of the ecosystem with having such dry soils, with having such shrubby, short plants that would die and build up. Every 10 years or so, it was normal for a giant wildfire to just give it a clean slate. The trees are actually adapted to that. You've got the pitch pine trees, which have a very thick protective bark layer on them to protect them from these disturbances, these fires. They also have a really hard seed coat that protects them. That actually, to release the seeds, they need a sort of disturbance. When increased urbanization in the Albany area came in, they wanted to suppress these fires. They did not want any chance of it burning down people's homes. So they worked really hard on suppressing these fires. Because of that, a lot of times that shrub and the dead plant life would build up and it would keep it as a tinderbox waiting to light up. Sometimes it did. There was a pretty devastating burning in the 80s that wiped out like hundreds of acres. So in the 90s, they decided to try a different management technique. They started having prescribed fire burns. These prescribed fire burns of the Albany Pine Bush have been pretty successful. They help clear out a lot of those dead shrubs and oak scrubs and make way for new plant life to come through, as well as prevent any of wildfires from popping up and actually devastating the area around the pine bush and not just the pine bush itself. Another benefit of having these controlled burns is they help regulate the quaking aspen population. These saplings kind of grow very quickly in the absence of the prescribed burns, so therefore, with their giant growths, they kind of soak up all of the nutrients from the soil and make it hard for other species to compete for any nutrients. Let's talk about the Carnable butterflies. Obviously, one of the most popular species here at the Albany Pine Bush. It's an endangered species. It was put on the federal endangered species list back in 1992. It was on the New York one back in 1977. The biggest threat, of course, they're facing is that habitat loss and destruction, primarily due to the inaccessibility of blue lupine, as that is their main food source during their caterpillar stage. Now, some of you may be wondering, doesn't the wildfires harm the Carnable butterflies? But actually, it doesn't. So the prescribed fires make way for new plant life to come through. And a lot of times that plant life that is there are going to be your shrub oaks, your quaking aspens, and it takes away the ability for any other vegetation to get nutrients, to get water. So by having those controlled burns, it makes it possible for the blue lupine to come up. And so because of the prescribed burns, we've seen larger numbers of the blue lupine, and therefore we've seen higher numbers of carnival butterflies. It's only a very limited time through the year that you can actually see the carnival butterflies in their butterfly stage. They only live for about 3 to 5 days, and you got to catch them right at the precise time. What's nice is you got 2 chances every year to be able to see them realistically. There's a spring brood in the beginning of May where they're in their butterfly stage, and then there's a summer brood at the end of July where they're going to be at that butterfly stage again. Like most species that go through a metamorphosis, they start off as an egg that then becomes a larvae. This larvae, the carnival butterflies, only eat the blue lupine, which is why it is such an important part of the Albany Pine Bush's habitat. In their larvae stage, they last there for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then eventually they get into their pupae stage, or they get into their chrysalis, and then they're there for about 8 to 11 days before they become that Carnable butterfly that we love to see flying around. And like I said, that's only for about 3 to 5 days, so you got to be really on top of when that brood is supposed to be coming out of their pupae. When I say habitat loss, what am I really talking about? I'm talking about originally this pine barren ecosystem spanned about 40,000 acres. It's now down to only about 3,000 acres. It has been massive, this destruction of this pretty unique ecosystem in inland pine barrens. That's not very common. And it's been pretty devastating to the population of the carnival butterflies. They've dropped 99%. They were almost completely extinct. But what's been really wonderful about the conservation efforts put in by the Albany Pine Bush, with really keeping up with trying to protect the blue lupine, its main habitat during its caterpillar stage, they've been able to see a pretty good increase in the numbers of the carnival butterfly population. So if you go out this spring, you might actually get a chance to see them. They're not as rare, but they are still incredibly endangered, because while the Albany Pine Bush has seen a lot of success in bringing back some of its carnival populations, that is not the same in a lot of the other historically landscapes for the carnival butterfly. Like I said, there are more pine barren ecosystems. There's a lot in that Michigan area, and they have not had as much success bringing back such large populations of the carnival butterflies as the Albany Pine Bush has.
A current pressing threat to the Albany Pine Bush is the proposed location of a Costco that is going to be on undeveloped land in the Albany Pine Bush. Once again, this land is home to endangered species. It is protected land. And if any of you know the Albany area, you'll know that 2 miles down the road in downtown Albany, there are warehouses falling down. There are factories falling down. They chose a site that is protected and undisturbed instead of a brownfield site that they could remediate and build a place that won't be harming endangered species. Because the location that the Costco is trying to go onto is protected land, an environmental impact report is required for any construction to be built. So, an environmental impact report was ordered, and guess what? It got delayed because of the pandemic. So in spring of 2020, Pyramid, the people that own the land, decided to prepare for the Costco anyway and clear cut the lot that's planned for Costco before the environmental impact report was in. Thankfully, a good civilian that was driving down the road happened to see this going on and knew that they were not supposed to be cutting down these trees because the environmental impact report was not in, and called a judge, and the judge ordered a cease and desist, and Pyramid got in trouble. And so it's been a year and a half and Costco has not been built. One of the things delaying the Costco being built was the most recent election cycle. Guilderland was waiting for the new town board to be voted upon, and one of the people that was voted into office was Amanda Beadle. Amanda Beadle received campaign contributions from Pyramid, the people trying to build the Costco. So it is suspected that her plans are to push the Costco through. As a result, it is very important that we educate people and try and get them to want to fight the Costco being built, because once again, it is land that is undeveloped, that is home to endangered species, and is protected, when there are plenty of locations downtown that would be amazing for a Costco.
Now that we've talked a little bit about the ecology and the ecosystem of the Albany Pine Bush, it makes perfect sense why it was chosen as a National Natural Landmark back in 2014. This is the reason why there is a large population of the people in the Albany, Guilderland, and Schenectady area that love this preserve. And it's been extremely devastating to see the battle of Pyramid trying to destroy this ecosystem by putting in the Costco.
Thank you for joining me for the second video, and I'll see you in the next one.